Welcome to the Never Ending 80s podcast. I am J.C.Hollywood, and my guest today is one of the true gentlemen of the Australian music scene. From 1987 to 1993, he played keyboards in the band Roxus, best known for their hit single, Where Are You Now? He then went into music production, which is where I met him. He's a great guy, he's a good friend of mine, and he's got some really great stories from the road in the 80s. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Andy Shanahan. Andy Shanahan, welcome to the Never Ending 80s podcast.
How are you?
I'm good, mate. I'm doing very well. I've been, keeping myself busy during lockdown. How have you been?
Yes, well, the same. We've been in the most lockdown city on earth, of course, down here in Melbourne. But it's surprising, very little has changed for me because I work from home. My studio's at home, so the only difference is I haven't been able to have clients for many months. So that's right.
So we worked together. We were just discussing.
We're surviving. No, looking forward to it all coming good.
Yeah, that'll be fantastic. Very nice. I do like the synth that you've got in the background there, and we're gonna dig into that as we go. You were, of course, keyboards for the band Roxus,
yes.
Which a quick brief search on the Wikipedia has you first getting together in 1987. Is that correct? How correct is? Let's play a game called How Accurate is Wikipedia?
Interesting. I haven't looked at the wiki for many years. 87 is correct. Absolutely it is. At the end of 87, we got together, and it was born out of another band that actually had signed a single to Polygram and done all this other stuff. So we were ready to pop, and then the band fell apart. So we got in Juno as a guitarist, and then found out how well he could sing. So we put him up the front, got another guy in, and we were signed 2 years later.
Fabulous.
A year and a half later, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So the band, was that Bar Raga? Was the previous band?
This was no. The original band was a band called Windsor Jam.
Right.
Who did a single deal on Polygram. No one will ever find anything about it because we never put anything up, which is okay. Bar Raga was the original name for Roxus just before we signed. We went out with that name, which I always personally didn't like at all. And it was actually me who pushed, Molly Meldrum came up with a suggestion that we call it after the lead singer's second name. And I was like the champion of that move. I thought that was a great idea. So, who can know what your decisions are back then, But I thought it was a very good idea. And it turned out well for us, I think.
I think it did great. I think it did great. Can you talk us through what the scene was like? Sort of, because you guys were very big in the Melbourne live scene when you were starting out. What was the sort of music scene like there in the late '80s in Melbourne?
Okay, so I joined Windsor Jam, which became Roxus, when I left school at the end of 1985. Like 3 days after my English exam, I was playing keyboards in a rehearsal room. So we went through 86 and 87 doing all of the Melbourne live scene. And at that time, believe it or not, you could still play gigs 6-7 nights a week in an original unsigned band. You could get opening slots for guys who had a single out, who were also original. They didn't have a big following, but the scene was so alive. That's what everyone did. We went out and saw bands every night of the week.
Yeah.
A very different scene and wonderful, like really wonderful with it, a lot of energy, a lot of possibility. Everything was expanding. Everything was growing, and everything was very positive. That was the feeling. It wasn't dark. It wasn't, as some things got later on. It really was a time of, there's plenty more where that came from. It was a great thing I like to apply to that time.
Yeah.
In terms of feeling,
Yeah. Any
possibility.
Venues, did you have any venues that were your favourites back then?
Yes, absolutely. One that's still going is the Corner Hotel.
Oh yeah.
In Richmond. Wonderful 750 person venue,
Yeah.
But around the corner we had the Eureka Club, which ran 7 nights a week with original bands in it all night. You had the the Central Club in Melbourne. Like there were so many gigs all around town. The Bombay Rock, which became the Phoenix Club. The Tote was going. That's actually still going. But there was just so many opportunities to play. There were 25, 30 venues hosting original bands almost every night of the week. In the mid-'80s, it really dropped off by the time we were signed in 89, because, of course, that period of time coincided in Australia with the introduction of the pokies into venues.
Yeah, yeah.
So a lot of venues actually just changed what they were doing to the very profitable pokies, apart from the, the hard scrabble, let's put live bands on 6 nights a week,
Yes.
So the opportunities were sort of drying up, but then there were some bigger venues opening. Billboard,
right,
in Russell Street, which is now called the 170 Russell, I believe. 170 Russell. Now. The Billboard ran for years, and we got to do, after we were signed in 89, they put us there for about a year every Thursday night.
Right.
And boy, we got burning good doing that night every week. Plus, we were doing 2 or 3 other gigs a week. They really worked us hard, the label, which was very, very, very smart.
Yeah.
By the label and the management and us to do that, because by the time the singles came out, we could really play together as a band.
Yeah.
We weren't using tapes or sequences or samples or anything. We were playing everything,
Yeah, right.
So we became a very well-rounded live band by the time they put us out in the public eye. That's how you used to do things back then. You get it right before you threw it out, into the world for people to see.
Yeah.
Which was great for everybody, I think. It was great for the bands because you got to realise your vision with some help and a surety you're going to have your record out.
Yeah.
But you had to have some patience to get it right. But the fans were also better treated then too, because everything that came at you was like really sorted out and polished and wonderful, because so many people had said yes to it by the time it got to you.
Yeah.
So many record execs, fans, music press, the radio stations, Countdown, the TV show, they all would have said yes to you by that point. So by the time it got to us, it was guaranteed to be awesome almost every song,
And it's so funny because at that same time, you've got that going on, but then at the same time, you've got Milli Vanilli, which is kind of the real start of that, let's put a couple of models in. Doesn't matter that they can't sing. We'll put a backing track on with them and stuff like that. And they get found out so fast. You think, well, that'll never happen again. But that was kind of the start of it happening.
Right. Although it wasn't a completely new idea.
Right.
The Village People,
of course,
for example, in the late 70s, was put together by a group of producers. There were always producers doing their own artists, back to Phil Spector, if you like.
Yeah.
But Milli Vanilli was a very cynical, corporatized, McDonald's almost pop music thing, which then, of course, people like Stockache and Waterman later on went on to perfect and make great.
Yeah.
That really set the tone for a lot of the late 80s into the 90s was the stock. And that was them too, let's work with celebrity people who aren't necessarily going to be pop stars on their own, but we'll make them pop stars with these songs and this sound and this look,
Yeah.
People could do that, but there was also, and the majority of the 80s music was people doing what they wanted to do to get into scenes and make the sounds they wanted to make and the records they wanted to make. So, but that's always been running alongside. It got very big in the 2000s, I think, the whole approach. The way in 1988, right, because we were signed in March 1989 as the band. What we did in 1988 was very interesting. We had been out playing and people knew who we were from both ends of the band that formed, but we shut ourselves away for a year in a rehearsal room. And we would go in there two or three nights a week for a year, just writing, playing together, working stuff out, and getting really, really good before we went out and did any live work. And when we went out, a lot of people who'd seen our other bands came out to see us and were just like, wow.
Right.
And that's how you sort of did things back then. And it was something that we were doing with your act in 99. It was the same idea. Get it right. get it so good. You know, you guys were rehearsing dancing, you were doing vocal coaching, like you were really working very hard on being amazing at what you were doing. And even to the way we were presenting it to the industry and everything was a really big deal and properly done. There's a lot of merit in that approach still.
Yeah. Well, I think,
to my mind, for people who are talking about music, there's still a lot of merit in that approach, you know?
Oh yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's. It's not the freshest of ideas anymore. But Malcolm Gladwell, of course, wrote the book Outliers, in which he talks about. That's where that sort of idea of the 10,000 hours of practice comes from. And of course, his point was that the Beatles spent that time in Germany, where they're playing almost 8 hours a day, 8 days a week.
Correct.
And just got the 10,000 hours. And I think it's a similar thing. And that's why you get, you know, bands, as you're saying, bands such as yourself, live bands, especially in Australia around that time, they were so road tested, you know, so used to playing together, so tight that that the show, and it's actually something that happened with the Never Ending 80s. Before our first gig, we had been rehearsing for 6 months. And so we came out of the blocks with a show that was already on the rails. Like we knew we couldn't mess it up because it was so rehearsed in.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I think, and it's, you don't see it a lot. It's not the approach that's taken too much these days, where it's very much,
and it's,
you've got a song, get you out on the road.
Right. A little bit. And it's the approach of the artists themselves now too. A very interesting thing that I contrast the 80s when I started making music to now, well, I'm still making music, is if I wanted to make a song happen, I could get in the room with like 3 or 4 other people and we could contribute. They had their gear, you know, like there was so much more to getting a thing going. What we found towards the middle of the 2000s is people could do everything at home by themselves. And that's only gotten crazier in the last 16 years after that point. Yeah. And a lot of people were doing great stuff at home. They're geniuses, you know. So all the stuff, everyone's like, oh, I can do it myself. I've got all the technology now. And that is fine. I'm not denigrating that approach at all. I'm saying what we learned by collaborating with each other developed us as well. And if you're doing everything on your own, it's very hard to know what you don't know. Right. So being critical of your process and what you're doing becomes very difficult if you're just doing everything by yourself. Now, some people, as I say, can do it. It's a genius approach, but there's a lot to be said for that collaboration part, that working with other people and bouncing ideas off them, playing with them, and, you know, not relying on the sequencer or the drum machine or the sampler, or playing with other musicians is a very interesting thing that, even if it's not the way you do it now, it's something you should probably put some time into just as an exercise, because it will develop you and give you other ideas. And I think old people's advice.
It's I was watching a doco the other day, which you may have seen. It's certainly something in your oeuvre, shall I say, called The Rise of the Synths, which is it's a doco.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, it's about the synthwave music and sort of actually John Carpenter's influence and how that's carried over into this modern synthwave movement. And one of the things that they talk about is, you know, you've got a lot of these bands who are, you know, in their own home putting together this synth music because it's even easier. You know, back in the 80s and the 70s, as you will attest, I'm sure, a lot of the sounds you were creating yourself, rather than now where it's like, well, here's a button and I can create something, a sound that would have taken hours or days to create back in the 80s. And what they were saying in the doco was that, you know, you see a lot of these synthwave bands come and go, and they arrive and disappear. And they said, you know, you can tell the ones that are going to stick around because they're the ones who actually go out and perform. And so they're collaborating and they're getting that experience. Because I think at the end of the day, you know, making music is as much fun as it is, but music is, it's a synergistic, there's synergy with, you know, a crowd and
Synergistic is
performing.
great. No, don't get it right the first time. Right, right, and it really is, and it's nothing like that energy either. There's no other force like it on earth. When you're in a venue and you guys on stage, in whatever format you're doing, are pumping, and the crowd are just going, "This is fantastic." That feeling is it just unable to be gotten in any other format, in my experience. And I've tried a lot of different things, believe me. Really, you know, unable to be equal and matched. It's an amazing and fabulous human experience. It really is.
Yeah.
You know, and it's important sometimes when we're thinking about this stuff to realize that this is a human thing that goes back all the way into prehistory, and the foundations of Homo sapiens is that communal coming together and making sound and making a thing happen together is such a human thing to do, you know.
Yeah.
And then, so we still get a visceral, instinctive thrill from that. That, as I say, you can't do it any other way.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I did touch on it very briefly there, but I really want to dive into it with you now.
Yes.
You're playing keys. You're playing keyboard in Roxus. You're a keyboard man. I know that you have a passion for synthesizers. Talk us through what it's like. I'm going to
what it's like.
Sit back.
Okay. All right. So, oh man, I can go on for a very long time with synths, as you can imagine. But in the early 80s, 83, 84, I was playing bass guitar.
Right.
In bands. And because, you know, the music I was into, which we will get into, was really bass heavy and fantastically done on the bass. It was a remarkable time for bass guitar at that time in music. So I was right into it. And of course, I was also into synths. So I had a Pro 1, you know, a sequential Pro 1 and a Roland SH2, which I can't believe I sold. But because they're just so fantastic. But I would play in bands, and I remember being 16 in a band. We were doing 80s covers and some original stuff, and I was playing bass guitar for half the set and bass synth for the rest of the set. So when I joined Roxus, my keyboard playing, well, the band that became Roxus, my keyboard playing was like this. Like, I really didn't know. I'm self-taught. I'm a completely self-taught musician. I learned a little bass, but I self-taught on the keyboard completely. So I had to get good fast, you know, to play with these guys. So, but I was more interested in the sounds that I could create with these little devices, you know. So I had those. I also ended up at some point with a Roland RS09 string machine, which was fantastic because it had an ensemble and you could put guitars through it. It was crazy. Make these strings and you sound like Duran Duran, you know.
Yeah.
Which is all I wanted to do. And then I sold a bunch of them to buy a Juno 6, Roland Juno 6,
right,
which was the first affordable analog polysynth you could really get. Yeah, 1981 they came out, or 80 they came out. I got one in the end of 81, so I'm 14.
Yeah, right.
And I'd worked all summer in my dad's factory to earn the bucks, you know, and sold other stuff. And it was just such an amazing experience to be interfacing with this thing and being able to play chords and the sounds that came out of the Juno 6. You couldn't save any of your sounds or get to get the sound every time.
Yeah.
But that was great to do as well. I used to go on stage with these patch sheets, man. That's my sound for the next song, seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're doing it live. Amazing.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So, and then of course, the 82, 83, 84 is when all the synths started adding preset buttons and memory, and some would have sequences on them, and you know, things started to step up, and we were incorporating drum machines, and so the old, and then MIDI, of course, which just changed everything.
Yeah. Which
is why this is here, actually. This is a Prophet 600, Sequential Circuits Prophet 600.
Right.
Not that rare. These were put out, well, not that rare. These were put out as a competition to the Juno 60 and the Poly 6,
Okay.
which all came out around the same time.
Yep.
This is the first synth that it was ever released with factory MIDI installed.
Right.
This was the first synth ever to have MIDI in it when it came out, which was summer of '83.
Okay.
Yeah, because the story is Sequential Circuits guy Dave Smith, the guy who ran it and still runs Sequential to this day. He designed MIDI with the founder of Roland, Kakahashi.
Right.
They figured it out and put it to everyone, and everyone adopted it. Every other manufacturer. So EMU, Korg, Yamaha, all these other synth manufacturers who were doing stuff, Oberheim, ARP, they all incorporated MIDI into what they were doing, and everyone agreed to do it. And it was about the only time I've ever seen that happen across an industry, self-driven,
Yeah.
And we're still on the same version. It's version 1.0 to this day.
Really?
MIDI. It still works the same way. Yep. It hasn't changed.
That's crazy.
They won a Grammy. They won an engineering Grammy for it, both of them, and a technical excellence award for it. It's quite an achievement.
Yeah.
The only thing that's changed since they incorporated it, was General MIDI came out a few years later, which was a whole pre-programmed sound bank that everyone could refer to.
Yep.
And then the USB connection, but it's actually still the same program, the same data set as we had in '83, which is insane. Right. Nothing else has really survived digitally that long.
No, that's crazy. Do you think it's just because they got it so right off the bat and that it's just you couldn't improve it? Or do you think it's because the interest in technology shifted away from that for a while and so they just stopped developing it?
No, because it was essentially a core element in every single synth that was made from that point.
Yeah,
and it became such an integral way to the way we were all working too in studios and in production. I think two things happened. One, it did everything that everyone wanted it to do to the major degree, and it was fast enough to do everything everyone wanted, really, in all real terms. And once it's out there and everyone's connected to it, you don't want to mess with it too hard. It'd be like rewriting the code for the internet today,
right?
In a lot of ways, I think. So, and 8-bit still is an architecture that fits into all of our systems, whether we're running 64-bit, 128-bit systems, 8-bit will fit in there just perfect. So it works.
That's amazing.
Brilliant design.
That's incredible. So for the tech geeks out there, tell us what instruments were you mainly running when you were touring with Roxus there?
With Roxus, very interesting. I started Roxus with an ESQ1 and Sonic, and a Juno 106, and they were what I was playing when we got signed. And then we got a sort of a development deal where we could buy instruments cheap through one, and these guys stopped in Sonic. So I ended up with an SQ80 and an EPS, and then a DX9 as well. So that was my Roxus rig. For most of it, actually, I added a VFX when we did the album, a VFX SD, another Sonic device, and also used to use a little S10 sampler, Roland, for a few string parts because it had a great sound.
Yep.
But that was my whole rig.
Yeah, right.
For basically all of it, yeah.
You weren't ever tempted to get yourself a Casio just so you could bang out the bossa nova?
No. And no. But look, there was still, I was still lusted even at that point in that 91, 92, 90, 91, 92. I was still lusting after a Jupiter 8, but I couldn't afford it. I still couldn't afford one,
Really?
Even with the cheap secondhand prices. No, they were still, 1,500, a couple of grand here to buy them secondhand. And I just never had that amount of money being in a band. I just never had that amount of money. We didn't make any money, which was fine. It didn't matter. We were living rock and roll lifestyle. But I would have liked a Jupiter 8. I would have liked a Prophet 5 at the time. I thought that was a pretty through. On the other hand, the Sonic stuff was gold. It saw me through the whole thing, gave me all the sounds I needed to do those records. And the good thing about the Sonic, excuse me, was being digital. It was easy to have the keyboards not sound so much like synthesizers.
Right.
Yeah, they could just be like any instrument. They were just a sound in the music, which was a very big thing when we were happening. It was like, let's not be too synthy.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Especially for us, we were sort of a rock band, so you didn't want to be too synthy. We didn't want to be Pseudo Echo or Duran Duran.
Yeah.
We wanted to be a rock band like Bon Jovi.
Right.
You know? So,
yeah.
And if you listen to their stuff, Dave Bryant, who's a genius keyboard player, like an actual certified Juilliard graduate genius.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, he graduated top of his class at Juilliard apparently.
Really?
And went, I can do concert piano around the world for the rest of my life, or I can do rock and roll. I think I'd make more money in rock and roll. So he joined Bon Jovi. It's like, good move, dude. Like, seriously. But he was dedicated because, we toured with him at one point in '89. We did the country with them. We opened for them. And, every gig, when we were doing sound check, he was backstage doing scales. He had a little rig set up down the back of the entrance ramp to the stage with an 88 note, and he would be doing his Hammond exercises every night. Like, he was a dedicated, absolute, pure musician. He was amazing. Yeah. So, but if you listen to his sounds, was my point I was making.
Yeah.
A lot of it doesn't really sound like synth. It's more just a keyboard sound, a riff, sort of occupying the same space as the guitar in a lot of areas, So
yeah.
A lot of the producers I was working with were after that. So the Sonic was great for that, I could give the sounds that we were after and that the producers thought were going to work as well. So very lucky. Our production team, our management and our label were very hands-off with us. They let us do the music and didn't try and come in and say, oh, no, write a song like this. Or we didn't have any of that. We were really, really well treated across the board. Absolutely, by everybody.
That's great. That's great.
But we're very, very lucky. We're incredibly lucky. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you touched on it there.
We had the time of our lives.
Yeah. No, well, now this is the thing, because you touched on it. You toured. You supported Bon Jovi when they were out here. You also was it Warrant? You supported. I'm looking at your Wikipedia again here.
That was phenomenal.
Yeah. Any sort of backstage stories? I mean, obviously.
Oh yeah, sure.
I don't want you to get anybody arrested, but.
Of course not. No. Well, no, nothing like that ever. We also did Poison, which was hilarious. Remember Poison?
I always open up and say is one of my guilty pleasures.
Oh, so after we were signed and we've been doing these billboard gigs for a while, the label thought it'd be a great idea with our first single coming out in the end of '89 to put us on the road with Poison to promote the single.
Yeah.
And we went on Countdown and on Hey Hey, at least not Countdown, with it as well. So they were doing the full court press, they wanted to break the band. But Poison were hilarious. Like, they were just this bunch of guys who like space cadets, absolutely hilarious. With that said, they were generally just lovely guys to us as well, but backstage, I do remember one thing we were opening for them was the first night we were opening for Poison. I think it was in Melbourne. It was in Melbourne. And it had been quite the day, First set up at Rod Laver Arena. Oh, my God, playing at 7,000 people tonight or something. And, here's this American band and this American production. It was just larger than life,
Oh, yeah.
And our singer, God love him, had a thing about water. When he was performing, he'd just splash it everywhere, right? It was just one of these things that he did. And of course, he's splashing water all over himself and doing all this on one of the ramps that leads down onto the stage. So we do our set. Everyone's like, we're off stage on a high. And half an hour later, Poison come on, the opening thing, blah, 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 all the pyros go off and all the band run onto the stage. CC DeVille, the guitarist, goes down his thing, slips on the water patch.
Oh, no.
And goes flying through the air and lands with a bounce and breaks his guitar, like on the opening note of the show.
Oh, no.
So we're like, oh, my God, because we realised immediately what had happened. Oh, my God, that's Juno's water. So he sort of slunk off, Anyway, we were waiting backstage at the end of the show, and their production manager came in to our little band room.
Right.
And he was a guy called Charlie, and Charlie was about 7'4" high,
yeah,
about 8'8" wide. A big African American guy comes in, he goes, just looks around at us, and we're all going. He goes, "Any of you guys put water on my stage like that again, I'm going to come in and sit on you." And walked out, and we're like, "Yes, sir, we're not going to put water on the stage." And we didn't put water on the stage the rest of the tour. Amazing.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's how you
backstage.
Yeah, that's how you threaten someone. Probably.
Absolutely. I didn't swear, didn't raise his voice.
Yeah. Him and Andre the Giant, they're the only two people I'm going to sit on you can be a threat.
Man, Andre the Giant, what a classic. One of my favorite 80s movies. There we go. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. All right, well, let's get into it, actually, because
sure.
It is. This is the Never Ending 80s podcast, of course.
Of course. Must not.
All right. So this is the Never Ending 80s podcast, and the way we like to start things around here is to ask you, well, I mean, not start, we've been talking for a good hour already.
Sure.
We'd like you to tell us, Andy Shanahan, what is your favourite 80s song?
I had to think about this one.
I can imagine.
But I've actually come up with an answer that I think I'm happy with, which is Love Action by the Human League.
Right.
In the very early 80s, I think it was 81 was Love Action.
Yeah.
A bass sound on that song killed me and set up my life.
Right.
Actually, I spent my life in pursuit of creating something that had that effect on people.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So my favorite song, that whole Dare album was just life-changing for me. I absolutely lost my mind in it. I wore my copy out. I really did.
Really?
It was a great record. And, I had to listen to it the other night just by happenstance because I do still think about the 80s a bit and realised that there's only like 4 songs on it that I actually really like now. But I do remember playing the whole record over and over and over and over again. I just loved it. Particularly those bass sounds.
Yeah.
I was like, how did, I spent a little time trying to figure out how they made it sound like that.
Yeah. Oh, Human League, I mean, amazing bass sounds. Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. But I mean, I think that was the thing as well. And it is something that I think has fallen away in recent years. And I think it's actually one of the reasons that this sort of reinvigoration of the vinyl industry is happening is that listening to entire albums, putting something on from start to finish, flipping it over, listening to the second half, not just playing your favorite song, not just jumping to your favorite song. And so you have these albums as well that are not only just great to listen to, that when you go back, you go, there's probably only 3 or 4 songs that I really like, but I'll listen to the whole album and I'm quite happy to do that. But at the same time, you've also got these albums where, I mean, like, for example, if you look at Invisible Touch by Genesis, you just go, how are all these songs on this one album? It's like just, the refinement of the songs was a real key issue. Nobody was really putting a lot of dead weight on their albums because there's some Fleetwood Mac albums that are like that. There's some Toto albums that are like that, where every song you just go, oh my God, this song as well. Oh my God. Every you listen to it, you say, oh my God, yeah, of course, Yeah.
So, yeah.
But,
it's an experience. There's also a flip side to it from the artist side, because we have noticed over the last 10 years a shift more towards the single-based artistic output by artists.
Yeah.
Which has its merits, it really does. But there was a point of getting a band or an artist to focus on creating a set of songs for an album, 10, 11, 12 songs that all fit together, that all followed a sound that you could go on tour on. It was actually a great way for a band to focus and get a body of work done that the fans got an amazing product out of, but the band also had something to work from, and then reference back to when they were doing the next thing. Album-based recording as an artist is a very, very useful thing to do, even if what you end up doing is doing an album's worth of recording and then releasing them all as singles, which some of my artists are doing now. But we do an album worth of songs.
Yeah.
An actual album. So
yeah. Well, I mean, it's the way to do it, and I mean, it's that kind of. It's funny because that idea, that approach, and that attitude to album, making an album and creating basically a journey, a sound journey where each song kind of leads into the next, and you've got to have you put your ballad here or whatever. That also, growing up in the 80s, that was what informed a mixtape.
Absolutely.
And it's these kind of rules that I have. Because now people go, oh, I've made a mixtape. It's 8 hours long. I've got 400 songs. And you look at it and you go, well, there's no through line here. Whereas, like with a mixtape, you've got 45 minutes, 60 minutes. You've got a handful of songs that you can do, and you're putting them together, trying to mimic what an album's doing, where the song is taking you on a journey. And it's funny that art has been lost. And I mean,
yes.
you wouldn't think of making a mixtape as an artistic endeavor. And I don't think we did at the time, because we didn't really give that much thought to what albums were. The artists were giving all that thought to what the album was, but we as a listener would just be listening to the album, and then in making a mixtape,
informed.
Yeah. You're basically getting educated. Educated on how to do it, which you then do as a mixtape.
Absolutely. And live sets are great to design that way too,
Yeah.
Right? For that visual experience that we were discussing earlier, that real energetic synergy. A great set list can make or break that, and an album sequencing, we call it as producers, is the album sequence. Yeah. That used to be a really, really important part of putting the album together. Mutt Lang was apparently insane about the sequencing of his albums.
Really?
The order of the songs and when they got played, that was like he spent on that, and would listen to all different combinations and going, or even on our record, the album, Mark Opitz and Alan Wright, who were our engineer producers, doing the same thing, listening in different orders of the songs as they were getting to a completion.
Yeah. The last album, and I'm not sure that this needs to be in, but the last album that I listened to where it was like that's a start to finish album. One of the more recent examples was the album. Did you ever listen to the album Contra by Vampire Weekend?
No. But now I'm going to look it up.
Have a listen. I mean, okay. I don't know if you know Vampire Weekend. They're very much a sort of they're a little bit ska, they're a little bit rock, they're a little bit of everything, but it's a really great sound. But Contra it's one of these albums where you're listening to all of the songs and you get to the last song, which is called Contra, and it is just the perfect album ender, where you go, right. That is an experience. I've loved that. I think there's a lot of modern albums you listen to, and you go, I might skip this song, because it doesn't feel like that. But Contra definitely,
correct.
Just an amazing. Every song leads you. The euphoria that you feel listening to it is orchestrated.
Absolutely, and I think there's very few examples of that kind of thing. A couple I can think of while you're mentioning this aspect of things. Churches, their record I listened to from start to finish.
Yep.
And pretty much any record by Perfume, the Japanese trio, actually kills me. Like, brilliant.
Yeah, right.
And BT as well. BT? Yeah. They have albums that you can put on at the start and just play all the way through, and you don't want to skip anything. You don't want to get the next song. You really don't. So
right. Let me.
And of course, all crazy synth stuff, because I've never left that state of being.
I mean, why would you leave it behind? Perfume, you say?
Well, exactly. Yeah, Perfume. One of my favorite groups of all time, as a matter of fact. I discovered them in discovered them in about 2010. And they'd already been going for 9 years at that point, and they're still going. They just released an album this last few weeks.
Yeah, right.
So they're in their late 30s, these girls, and they are just phenomenal. Like, and the Perfume thing is, it's not just their singing; they dance. Every song is completely choreographed from start to finish.
Yeah, right.
And they work with the girl who did all the choreography for the Tokyo Olympics.
Right.
Right. So she's gotten through her work with Perfume, she's become the primo choreographer in Japan.
Right.
And they're like I suppose they're like Japan's answer to Destiny's Child.
Okay.
If you will. They're that big in Japan, you know.
Yeah.
They're icons that can't walk out of their hotel rooms there.
Right.
Superstar.
I think
So,
I have.
do yourself a favour, Perfume. I love it. Future Pop is a great album to start on.
That's amazing. Now,
yeah.
we have meandered here.
We have a little sorry about that.
Top song, Humanly, Love Action. Not to be confused with Love Actually, the film with Keira Knightley. No.
But what a great movie. Anyway, yeah.
Let's move on to our next topic then, which is your favorite 80s album.
This was less difficult for me to actually hone in on, although there's a plethora of great records for me to choose from in the 80s.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with the original Duran Duran album.
Right.
The one with Planet Earth on it.
Yeah.
That's my favorite 80s album. And again, I can play that one from start to finish and regularly do in the car to this day. Yeah. From start to finish all the way through. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a CD player in my car, so I still listen to CD. You know?
Yeah, right. That's good. Yeah. Does it still bounce around when you're driving it?
No. Hey, no. I'm very lucky with that. Yeah. It acts flawlessly in my car. Yeah.
CD player I had in my car, you couldn't put anything in it. It just it'd start jumping straight off the bat. Duran Duran, the production on Duran Duran albums is just something else. It was such an amazing sound. It's full but crisp. Some amazing. I mean, the sound of Duran Duran. I don't know if you saw the film Sing Street, which is an Irish film.
Okay.
And it's set during the 80s, and it's basically this young man starts at a new school, and he starts a band to impress a girl, and his music taste is coming from his brother. And his brother says, right, now you've listened to that, you've got to listen to this. And, he keeps doing it. And he gets him into Duran Duran, and then he gets him into The Cure. And their musical styles start changing. And it is one of the things, I think Duran Duran are possibly best remembered for their music videos, because their music videos had such an impact, and they really revolutionized that kind of storytelling through video and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
And I think to the detriment... Sorry, mate?
With an Australian director doing all that, by the way.
Really?
That was Russell Mulcahy shot all those clips.
I mean,
the guy who made Highlander.
I feel embarrassed. I feel like I'm showing my ignorance here, but that is...
No. This is my nerdiness. This is my nerdiness. Like I read all this stuff and tell, oh my God, I was Russell Mulcahy. Because I was a huge fan of everything that was going on, whether it was the film clips, the music, what they were wearing, their friggin' hairstyles. Like, I was into it, man. Like, the new romantic movement was a big part of my life. And we were so lucky here in Australia. I was thinking about this when we were going to do the podcast. We were very lucky here in Australia because we got the best of both worlds from either side of the Atlantic. We got the UK influence. All their best stuff came over here from Kate Bush and Peter Gabriel and all the great stuff, madness that was happening. Yeah. We also had the American side coming in with all their fantastic stuff. Yeah. Chic, all the disco stuff that was happening, glam rock, so we were getting the best of both, and the melting pot that created here musically was something else. I think that's why, particularly during the 80s, Australian musicians tended to punch above their weight a little bit. on the world stage. And to a degree, we continue to do that, as we should. But I think that was part of the reason why we were very lucky to get the best of both aunties, giving us this wonderful feed of, their best. And listen to this stuff. This is great,
Yeah.
And as I say, I think that's what informed a lot of, because if you have a listen to what we were doing in 89 and into the 90s, we sounded very American.
Yeah.
Deliberately, we wanted to sound like that because we loved that sound. And we've been exposed to it. We were trying to emulate that. We weren't as good as what they were doing, but we were trying to emulate that. We came up with a sound that was close to it and did well.
Yeah.
Because, we were hitting points that other people were enjoying about that style of music and that sound,
Yeah. Sorry, I was going to say, I think you've hit on a very pertinent point with the Australian sound. In many respects, especially in the 80s, Australia did have quite a unique sound in that sometimes it sounded very American, sometimes it sounded very European or very English, and it could be from the same band. It could be from the same song. There are times that you've got In Excess sounding like Simple Minds, but then you've got In Excess, it's just, that melting pot that Australia was created its own unique sound by blending those musical sounds that we were, that were trying to be emulated. They became their own thing, which I think makes it, made it so unique and so interesting.
Icehouse is another great example of exactly what we're talking about. Like phenomenal, Hunters and Collectors, even to a degree. The early stuff was very kind of the Cure of Forest. It was very much like that. We were very, very fortunate. Eurogliders were happening at the time. Pseudo Echo came out of that. They were all Australian takes on what other people were doing in other movements overseas. And we were able to inject a little thing into it that made it unique in Australian. It was a great time, as I say. And we're very lucky. And I think the answer to the next question you're going to ask me, which is my favorite TV show, I narrowed that down, which again, that was actually a task. Countdown.
Right.
Would have to be my, the impact that show had on all of our lives was it's very hard to overstate.
Oh yeah,
because it was a very different time. We didn't have the internet, we didn't have computers, we didn't have much of anything. And TV, there were 4 channels still at that point, and you knew what was on at each time, and you couldn't record it. You had to sit down in front of it, So Countdown was a thing you had to be in front of the TV at 6:30 on a Sunday night. And Molly, God love him, he had a gift, that man. He had an amazing gift that I've never seen equaled, as a matter of fact. And remember, he managed us, so I got to know the man really well. He signed us and managed us. He could listen to a song once, and 9 times out of 10, he would go, this is going to be a hit or this is going to bomb. And he'd be right. I've literally met nobody else since who's been able to do it with that amount of accuracy. He's a very, very clever man.
It's because it's amazing.
Very talented.
It wasn't. It's his ability to do it wasn't genre specific. It wasn't like he could go, that's a pop song, and that's going to be a top pop song.
Absolutely.
I mean, it was basically his musical taste through Countdown defined the musical taste of Australia, but it wasn't. It wasn't a guy sitting there going, "Oh, listen, here's my favorite songs" or anything like that, because he had such a broad musical taste.
Yes.
And you're right. It is one of the things that I think is kind of overlooked. The fact that he had that ability to just identify this music.
Absolutely, and there are so many bands who many of us don't realize, are artists who actually say that if it wasn't for Molly, they wouldn't have their success that aren't Australian. The number one of those being Madonna. Madonna broke here first.
Right.
And he pushed the absolute living hell out of it. He loved it, you know?
Yeah.
Holiday, that blew up here first, and the American record company paid attention, and it was all over for Madonna. ABBA got their break here through Molly.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the thing, people don't realise that Ace of Base, that all blew up here because of Molly going, guys, you got to check, you know, do yourselves a favour. That was his whole tagline, wasn't it? But he worked very hard at that too. He, you know, he would take lots of meetings through the week with label execs, radio people, club. He was in the clubs a lot, listening to what was going on. He was in the scene 24 hours a day, just immersed himself, and then did this hour of TV, and his whole life was built around this hour of TV every week, you know?
Yeah. How, if I can ask you, because obviously he's credited with discovering you guys and signing you and stuff like that. How did that come to be? Were you performing? Did he just come to see a show, or you know?
Well, this is a great story about things lining up properly. Juno, our singer, who is to this day an amazing singer.
Yeah.
His dad was a musician of some incredible note. Like, he used to play with Miles Davis and Frank Sinatra. He was a horn player for Frank Sinatra. So he was incredibly well regarded. And also ended up playing a lot with Daryl Summers.
Right.
Right? Because Daryl was a big band drummer.
Well,
before he became hey guy. He was a big band drummer, you know. So Silvestri played with Daryl, and as a result got invited to Daryl's wedding. Right. Molly was at Daryl's wedding. Juno meets Molly. Molly's like, who are you? You know, you crazy little kid with the long hair, and you know this. And he's like, you're gonna make me a star, dude. And like, went full front, you know. So Molly's like, yeah, okay, or sure, mate, you know. So he turned up to his house one day, knocked on the door, brought brash as you like, and goes, Molly. And Molly goes, oh, okay, come in. And he had our demo tape. And he said, oh, I want to play this demo tape. And Molly goes, all right, no worries, but I'm just doing my TV Week interview. I'm sitting over there. You just go in there and make sort of home, and I'll come in and see you. And Juno, brash as you like, goes up to the stereo, opens the cassette, puts it in, and cranks the volume. And Molly comes in and goes, who's this? He goes, it's me. He goes, rubbish. He goes, be at the Corner Hotel on Thursday night. And that was the third gig we'd ever played. And he signed us the next day to his management. And then we started negotiations and ended up on his label. It was the best fit for us. So
that's incredible. And how was his management style? Was he a particularly hands-on? I mean, obviously he's trying to run the TV show, isn't he?
The poor man. I mean, no, I really do mean that. We really nearly gave Ian a nervous breakdown, I'm sure of it. You know, like, don't worry about running labels and you know, dealing with the international acts and flying back and forth everywhere and being Molly Meldrum. Yeah. We were the thorn in his side, man. He couldn't control us. He was trying. And look, it wasn't the band as such. It was a couple of members in the band, one in particular, who just delighted in making life difficult for everyone around them. Right. For the sheer fun of it, and also for the sheer power of it, and not feeling like they were being squashed out. He was the most important guy in the room wherever he went, you know. So there was a lot of clash of power, you know, and even with Gadinsky, who ran the label with Molly, you know, and ended up taking over our management when Molly goes, you know what, I've had enough. 3 years in, he fired himself as our manager because we'd nearly sent him over the edge. You know, look, there's a famous story that'll illustrate this point. When we were recording our album, he was still managing us when we were tracking the album in mid to late 1990. And just after that, we went on a tour to get out and get some live stuff happening again. And Juno wasn't into it. He wasn't feeling very well. So we're in Sydney and we've got 3 shows booked, plus another few weeks down the track in regional. And he just goes, not doing it, going home, see yous, and walked out and booked a plane flight home. And we're like in Sydney to do a show that night. Like, on the way to the airport, he stopped in at the studio and caught up with Mark Opitz, our producer. And Mark's working on the In Excess live album, right? In the studio, mixing it. And they were doing a tricky thing where they'd recorded a number of shows to make this live album, and the bass had dropped out in one song, like the cable had fallen out. So they were grabbing the bass part from another performance and splicing it into this one, but it was still live. It was still there. Anyway, so Gina goes, "What are you doing?" And Opitz explained it to him, and Gina goes, "Oh, okay." Gets on the, and Molly's on the phone, comes straight to my house and talk to me. So he goes to Molly's house from the airport and is sitting down, and Molly's like, "What are you doing to me? The band's, now we've got to get them all back from Sydney and blah, blah, blah. And what were you doing up there?" He goes, "Well, I just went and saw Mark." And Molly goes, "Okay, what is he doing?" And he told him, and he sort of didn't relay what was going on properly. He sort of put it that they were re-recording parts.
Right.
For the live album. And Molly went up the next week on Countdown and eviscerated In Excess for not being true. That's not a live album, which it actually was. So this huge embarrassing thing happened. This is the sort of thing that would happen for poor Molly. Where he went up against a band for no reason, who he loves and who loved him, and nationally sort of embarrassed himself because of something this guy said, So no. That was a very famous story, one of many, of why it became very difficult for everyone around us, which is why we didn't continue in a lot of ways. Everyone around us just giving up. It was too hard,
Yeah.
And in the band, we were like, "Oh, this is too hard." We were very silly. We were very young. We were riding high in life. We were pop stars, and everything was going to be great.
Yeah.
I think we all just thought it would continue forever. But we actually made some bad mistakes of pissing the wrong people off too long.
Yeah. Right.
Where we just lost all our support, and it became untenable. We'd signed a US deal by this point.
Yeah.
A very big deal, actually. We signed a 6-album deal with MCA.
Wow.
Yeah, it was through MCA. It was an imprint called Savage, and they signed us for 6 albums, and the total advances in the initial contract were like $3.2 million US. So we were set. We were actually set. We had all the money we needed for tour support. The advance on the first album paid back all our debts, so we actually cleared our debt. We walked out of a deal with not owing the record company any money, which is a very rare thing in the Australian business at that point, particularly with our level of, we hadn't sold a lot of records. We got a couple of gold albums. That's not enough records to make back what we spent. I mean, the amount of money we spent making that album and those singles and those film clips, we spent $500,000 of Mushroom's money on that, and Molly's money, making those records, and we paid it back.
Yeah.
So
right.
that was achievement. We didn't make any money, so that was okay. We managed to pay back the full debt, which was unusual. Only 15% of released artists pay back the money spent on them.
Yeah.
That's been a rule of the music industry since the late 50s, all the way through to 2004, 2005, was of all the artists and bands who were signed, you did the project, you got it into the store, only 15% of those would recoup the cost.
Really?
The rest would lose money. 85% of the people you put in the store would lose money for you. That's the way record industry works.
Wow.
And when you understand that basic, so this is the UK, the US, Australia, this is how everybody works. That was just reality. That means that 15% of artists were paying for the whole thing, all the recording studios, all the records that everybody put out. That was all being paid for by this top, 15 percentile, which is why it was so hard to get signed and get anything spent on you, because 85% of the time you're going to lose money for me, man. Yeah. I know that as a business reality. So you better be good. Well, what do you got? What do you got? What do you got? That's good. Make it better. It's got to be better. You're competing out here in the world. Have a listen to what's going on out here. You're listening, going, man, that's awesome. Because it was everything that was going on was amazing.
Oh yeah.
Musically, people were at their peak. There was a peak that happened in the 80s of songwriting and of sonic exploration that we really lost by the time the mid-90s came in, and everyone had samplers and everyone had lots of technology, and synth sounds were nothing new. Yeah. But the 80s was very different. The way songs and sounds were constructed, and the way the audience was about music too. Music was just a lot more important to everyone in their daily life. As I said earlier, we didn't have a lot of other things to do. Music was kind of it. And so we loved everything that we put into everything now. We just put into music,
Yeah.
Which was fabulous. I loved it.
That's incredible. That's amazing. All right. Well, we better cover off a couple of the other categories. So we've done 80s song, 80s album, 80s TV show. So now the big important one. Yes. Let's be honest. What is your? And I'm gonna guess. I think I know what it is.
Do you really?
As you wish.
Possibly.
What is your favorite 80s movie?
Hoping very hard not to disappoint you on this one. Blade Runner.
Oh, okay. Hang on. No, I thought it was going to be Princess Bride, but all right.
Okay, yeah. Well, no, that was in the running. It was in the top 5. Believe me, that was in the top 5.
Blade Runner,
along with Aliens.
Yeah.
And a few other movies, but I had to pick Blade Runner because it still is a movie that I can watch all the way through from start to finish and just be entranced the whole time.
Yeah, it also happens to have a very synth-heavy
There was something
soundtrack
about the way that movie was shot.
Yeah.
It does. Brilliant, I'm jealous.
Yeah.
With his freaking Yamaha CS80, which hit a new milestone this week, I might point out. The Yamaha CS80 hit a new milestone this week. Speaking of very old synthesizers that, there's now one on eBay for 100,000 US.
Yeah, right.
So it's fully restored, but that's the asking price for a working, fully operational CS80 now is 100 grand, which is insane. I've seen 60, 70, 90, but 100 grand they've hit this week. There you go.
Good Lord. Sorry, but I derailed you. Blade Runner.
No, that's right. We always go into synths. Yes, great movie. Brilliantly shot, brilliantly acted. It was dark and apocalyptic in a way that I hadn't encountered before. I just loved everything about it. Loved the way it sounded, the way it looked. Some of the acting, Rutger Hauer, and when you realise later on that final scene with Rutger when they're on the rooftop, that speech was improvised. It was ad-libbed. It wasn't in the script.
Good Lord.
It's not in the script. He improvised that whole thing about tears in rain.
Like that was not even hey, listen, try and work in something about tears and rain, or it just all came out?
Nope. He came up. Rutger's actually quite the actor. He's quite an amazing actor and technician in acting. I just think his character in that of Roy Batty is just amazing, I loved everything about that film, every single thing about it, and I quoted it for years and years and years, just any line I could come up with.
I remember when it came out, my brother's friends went and saw it, and their feedback was it just rains the whole time.
Yes.
And having subsequently seen it, I'm kind of like, I mean, that shouldn't be your big takeaway from it, is that it rains the whole time. I mean, it is. The thing about it as a film, I have a lot of things to say about it, actually, and a lot of opinions. It is the whole cyberpunk movement. So that movie comes out at the same time that William Gibson writes Neuromancer. To the point, I don't know if you've ever seen William Gibson interviewed about it, but he was writing Neuromancer, and it came out, and he was like, "This is like, it's my story. They've copied my story. I don't know what to, am I writing something that I've got no place for?"
But they'd actually gone on the Philip K. Dick. Book instead. That's what they claim that it was based on.
Yeah, and it basically
androids dream of electric sheep?
Yes, yeah. It's a short story, wasn't it? Yeah. The effects of the film still felt today. It's visually so impactful on a whole subgenre. The whole cyberpunk subgenre, the synthwave movement. That film had a major impact on it. And it's funny because recently I was on a site where I was on Instagram, and there was somebody doing which film are you voting for? And I believe it was The Matrix versus Blade Runner. And The Matrix is fine; it's a great film, but and The Matrix had like an 80% vote over Blade Runner.
Wow!
And I was like, that is tragic. And then I realized, because when I was doing my Year 12 exams, they allowed Blade Runner. You could use it as a reference, which was the first year that you could.
Awesome.
That they would allow movies. In fact, I remember in Year 11 I had referenced Pink Floyd's The Wall in one of my literature exams, and my teacher had circled it and said, "This is not an appropriate reference." And I was like, "Well, I disagree."
It is to me.
Yeah.
Good.
But then Blade Runner, of course, ended up on the syllabus, and I think that's what might have led to a lot of people going, "I prefer The Matrix to Blade Runner because I didn't have to study The Matrix when I was in high school." I think that sort of intrinsic. I had to study it, so I hate it. But I can't imagine anybody hating Blade Runner. It is an amazing film. Now let me ask you the big question.
Yes.
Is Deckard a replicant?
I don't think so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing is the original ending of the film. She dies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they changed it at the last minute to make it that she. But that was the studio. That wasn't the filmmaker at all. So. And Ridley Scott has done some of the most amazing films any of us have ever seen.
Yeah.
But this one still stands out to me as just a masterpiece.
Yeah.
And, among a number of masterpieces, I love most of his work through his life. But he hit a thing with Blade Runner that nobody else has ever been able to match.
Yeah.
And I did enjoy the update. I really enjoyed it. I liked it, but it's a very different film than the original.
Yeah.
A little bit like what was the other one they redid that was really insane? Total Recall. Yeah, that didn't work out.
I didn't see that remake.
But but I did enjoy the update. I thought it was a really well done. I was going to say, I think it's a movie that a lot of people should watch now because it really does deal with a lot of the things that we are going to be facing with AI over the next few decades. Some of the developments that are going on in robotics and AI are going to mean that we have to deal with something like a replicant sometime in the next 100 years, I reckon. And there's a lot of warning in that film that we should pay attention to if we are considering doing that. I'm not sure it's a good idea at all.
Yeah. Well, it's this pursuit of artificial intelligence. Science fiction has shown us. If you give something artificial intelligence, if you are trying to create, in essence, sentience, then you have to treat it as sentience. You have to respect it as a living being, even if it is created.
Absolutely.
But it does, yeah. It creates a very grey area.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um,
Let's run into the last topic. The last topic, of course, is the most ambiguous one. I am asking for your favourite 80s memory. Now, of course.
favorite 80s memory.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I'm probably going to have to, with this one, go with signing my record deal.
I mean, yeah, I can imagine.
That's my favourite memory. Is because of the. I mean, it took us from the end of '85 to March of '89, really working pretty hard the whole way through to get to that point.
Yeah.
So that was a real triumph moment for me. It was like, yeah, man, but it set me up for an interesting life too, because it was all over by the time I was 23, just about to turn 24. And I'd achieved everything I'd set out to do at that point in my life. I'd actually done it all except for having any money. But it was like have a record in the top 10, have a gold record, play the Rod Laver Arena. Well, I'd done all that, so I was like, I better figure out what to do now. But I was lucky. I had these, and I'd also, in the process of doing the band, gone into recording studios and worked with those guys and gone, oh, wow, I thought I had the coolest job in the world. That's actually the coolest job in the world. That's awesome. So I just became one of those guys, and was able to drag some of this along with me. And it's been a fabulous life on that level too. So I found another thing to go for.
Yeah. Oh, and excel at, might I say.
Oh, you're a legend. Saying so, mate. Thank you. Hey, listen, I've got that stuff we did. Because when I built this studio, the first record I did was for Jessie London.
Right. Yeah, right.
In fact, I built this studio essentially to do her record in many ways, which is a lovely, lovely record. We did a fabulous job together on that one. And when we were doing that, she gave me she had a copy. I'd lost my copy of all our stuff that we did. So I had to listen to it only very recently, man. There was some stuff in there, man. We were on the right path.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, we really were. You guys were definitely something quite special and treasured memory for me from my time back there at Kick and doing all that stuff, I loved thinking about our time and our session and all the involvement of Jerome and Joe and all those guys, It's fabulous.
That was a great time, yeah. I have some fun memories. I also remember it was one of the few times in my life that I had McDonald's for 3 meals in a day.
Oh, wow. That stuff hurts.
That was a rough time.
You should have come on the road with us, love. Oh, man, wicked. Oh.
Hey, looking at your favourite 80s memory, can you talk us through the night? So you're doing the gig. Juno's been to see Molly. He said, come to the Corner Hotel, but did you know Molly was going to be there? Was it locked in that Molly was going to be there? So you were prepared he was going to be there, right?
Well, it's as prepared as you can be when your entire future's on the line for one gig. Hopefully all your gear makes it through the gig and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But because we'd put in the work and we really wanted it, we just went out there and gave it everything we had. Yeah. And he was impressed. He was like, "You guys have got something very special going on here." So, but I'll never forget. The next day, we went around there for a meeting. He's like, "Come over to my house and we'll talk about what we're going to do with you." And so I walked in there, and my mate Darren, the drummer from our band, who I'd been in the other band with, and along with the bass player, and really good mates, we're sitting down. He's talking. He's going, "Okay, now what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to get you to the stylist over here, and we're going to do the photo shoot here, and we're going to get the film clip, and I think we'll talk to Michael about the deal." And we're just sitting there going, "That's Molly Meldrum," sitting like right there, like, it's Molly. Like, we couldn't believe what was happening to us. It was surreal. And he was just so kind, and so thoughtful and so knowledgeable. And also, when we were being silly, he would pull us up on it.
Right.
He was a courageous man, and we needed him to be courageous with us. It didn't work in some ways, but he, look, and the best thing I can say, I love the guy, is he did his very best for us. He gave it everything he had, and he tried his hardest with us. And I hope he's remembered the way he should be by Australians when he does pass, and he's in history. I hope he's remembered as being a very, very important, because his hey years, a lot of people were sort of like, oh, silly Molly, doesn't know how to speak properly and all this. So he's a bit of a dunderhead. He's not. He's a genius.
Yeah.
And a very, very committed music fan.
Yeah. So I think we're going to leave it there. Andy Shanahan, thank you so much for joining us here on the Never Ending 80s podcast.
Oh, mate, it's been an honour, and thank you for asking me. I'm actually quite touched. Thank you. It's great.
Listen, the question on everybody's lips was, Andy Shanahan, where are you now? Are you missing me tonight?
Mate, I've missed you since the day you walked out of my studio. I'm pretty sure that was the last time we said hello for a long time. I have missed you, mate.
I've missed you too. Great to catch up with you, Andy Shanahan. You're an absolute legend. Thank you for joining us on the Never Ending 80s podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So that was my conversation with Andy Shanahan. Thank you once again to Andy for joining us here on the Never Ending 80s podcast. And thank you for listening. If you would like to send us a message or share your own top 5 list with us, you can hit us up at any80spodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy the podcast, share it with your friends. Tell them about it. Get them on board. Maybe leave us a review on whichever podcast listening app you use. I'm J.C.Hollywood. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you next time on the Never Ending 80s podcast. This episode of the Never Ending 80s podcast is brought to you by Sleeshman Drum Co. Pioneering sound innovation since 1971, the Sleeshman Drum Company are the inventors of the modern-day twin double bass pedal, a revolutionary product making life easier for drummers everywhere. They also pioneered the free-floating acoustic drum. Now, if like me, you have no idea what that means, it's a drum tuning system that doesn't bolt onto the drum's shell, i.e. the wooden bit that makes the drum sound good. This results in a great-sounding drum with more tone than ever before. Created in Australia and still manufactured in Australia, Sleeshman drums are exported around the globe to some of the world's best drummers, including Queen's own Roger Taylor. They're even the kit of choice for the Never Ending 80s own Davey Rocket. So if you are in the market for a new kit, make sure it's a Sleeshman.